It's for tomorrow.
Sure. So, there's no formal starting, right? I just begin?
Yes.
So people have read it? Okay, I don't. I have no idea what's okay, we are starting, right? I have nothing. And Humanities, BRAC University, and the other universities which are wonderful conference on the 1940s. Time is always limited, and I would like to keep some time for questions and answers because delaying any longer, I will hand over the mic. I belong to BRAC University, but there might be people here who are not from BRAC University. So would you kindly introduce yourself, and then you can start. And you have comments, right?
I'm Sabiha, currently teaching as Professor of English and Humanities at BRAC University. And my primary interest is women's writings nowadays. And in this paper, I am trying to share some findings of a project I had around 2017 as the coordinator. And I will basically tell stories about women's narratives I received. And just to introduce the project, I'll read from this one page of my paper. And I would begin with Yasmin Khan's comment that the history of partition is a work in progress. Because as she claims, major oral history projects are still underway and new archival sources are still to be unearthed. This paper originates in one such collaborative project on the partition and consequent migration between West Bengal and the southern region of present-day Bangladesh that I coordinated for the Bangladesh part in 2017. The counterpart in the project was Center for Language, Translation and Cultural Studies of Netaji Subhash Open University in Kolkata, where they had a large repository called Bengal Partition Repository. And the project was titled Locating Post-Partition Amnesia in Memory and Literature and Indo-Bangladesh Perspective. And a one-year-long project intended to identify some of the challenges, trauma, suffering, violence, and stroke ruthlessness and the anxiety of new settlements in the immediate victims of the partition who came from India to southern Bengal and also went to West Bengal from Greater Khulna and surroundings. The perspective was to continue the discussion on literature, language, culture, and ways of livelihood, nature of relationships with memory fostered by families split across borders, with a focus on the stories of adaptation and assimilation in the new places of settlement. The project needed to go beyond grand historical narratives of partition independence to unearth authentic micro-narratives of individuals that constituted the discourse of migrancy on both personal and national levels. A personal understanding of peace and war, emotional intensity of individuals shaping the collective discourse on national conflicts and bringing out the voice of the marginalized, these are major concerns of any such oral history project. And since literature, especially fiction, has played a major role in representing the partition in its many trajectories, the project had a focus on fictional works by migrant writers who had memories of the event recounted in their work. Hasan Azizul, who is very close to my heart because I have personal connection with him, is one of the major Bengali writers who came to East Pakistan from Bardhaman in India, and in numerous fictional writings as well as his own autobiography, he narrated the experience of partition migration. This paper reads his Agunpakhi, translated as The Fire Bird, a novel published in 2006, to see how female agency is treated in this novel, while triangulating his narrative with stories of women from real life. The paper refers to two micro-narratives from the project in which I had 30 interviews conducted in 2 years' time. And I wanted to know how the women responded to the political aspects of the partition and how they handled its aftermath in their personal life, creating a home and the world binary in the understanding of Bengal partition. The paper investigates into two major elements in the migrated life of Bengali women: opportunity of being educated and owning property rights, and asks definitive questions on this. My first question, as you can see there, did the women get better opportunities for education after the partition or because of the partition? And could they make decisions about property and own their property? So from here onwards, I will just tell stories. Agunpakhi is narrated by a female protagonist who is anonymous. Her husband is also anonymous. She is writing Kotta. The master of the house is Kotta, and this is written in a specific dialect of West Bengal, which is interesting but very difficult to understand to some people. So here, the trajectory of the girl's education is given in the beginning of the novel, where she becomes an orphan very early in life, and she has a younger brother. She does not go to school, but she learns household chores and child upbringing from the atmosphere. She has a grandmother who was widowed long back, her father's aunt. So she she was married very early to a man who was double her age. But this man was interesting. Hasan Azizul is creating, it's a veiled narrative. This is about his own mother, and I interviewed him afterwards, and he agreed that he tried to impose some ideal relationship on his parents, and his father became the educator of his mother, which was to some extent true. So this husband, he was kind of inspiring the wife to get some formal education at home, and he became her tutor. So this is the girl's father who told very early when she was orphaned, what is the use of school for the girl? She will turn unruly and will talk back to you. What else will she learn from there? Why should a girl study in school? That is the father talking here. And the husband, after the marriage, the husband is telling his wife, Lekha pora shekhar kono boyesh nai. There is no age limit for education. If you learn to read and write, you will know the ways of the world. So he wanted the wife to be, knowledgeable about the world, what was happening outside. So here comes the, home and the world binary. The husband was asking the wife to take care of the home and was also inspiring her to know about the world a little. And when the riots were going on at the wake of the partition, he asked his wife, tell me what you see as the difference between the Hindu and the Muslim. And the wife is surprised. She never thought of this. No, nor have I ever thought this could be my concern. That is her response to it. And the husband is annoyed with her, and he says, you are concerned of your family. You can look at the Bangla here, because I think in my translation I could not actually bring out all the nuances of the language. So language is falling short here. You are concerned of your family. There is no harm in it. Your world is your kids, relatives, and neighbors. Should I? I'm thinking of time. Let me read the Bangla.
Yeah, this is a Bangla man, remember.
তুমি তো সংসার করছো নাকি? কেউ তোমাকে বারণ করছে না। ছেলে মেয়ে আত্মীয় স্বজন পাড়া পড়শি এসব নিয়ে তোমার সংসার। সব ঠিক, তবে তোমার সংসারই কি সব? আর কিছু নাই? সংসারের বাইরে গা আছে, একটি দুটি নয়, হাজার হাজার লাখ লাখ। তেমনি আছে তোমার দেশ, হাজার দেশ, সারা দুনিয়া। দুনিয়ায় কত মানুষ, সবাই যদি শুধু নিজের নিজের কথা ভাবতো, তাহলে দুনিয়ায় আর মানুষ থাকতো না। মারামারি কাটাকাটি করে সব মারা পড়তো। So this is how the husband is trying to convince her that she should read the newspapers, Bangla newspaper that came to their village. regularly. And no, I have skipped this part. So she is kind of creating her own understanding of the partition by being challenged by her husband. And she is not ready to accept that this country that is suddenly becoming a foreign country to her, and since she is a Muslim, she has to move to the other part of it. She doesn't agree. And in this novel, we find the novelist giving the agency to the female protagonist, which I believe every reader will question while reading, because we know the history as something otherwise. So she is kind of coming to her own understanding of it. And I was thinking of Nora, because I was trained because in the field of Ibsen, so I always can connect to Nora in A Doll's House. And her first comment here is, চারা গাছ এক জায়গা থেকে আর জায়গায় লাগাইলে হয়, এক দেশ থেকে আরেক দেশে লাগাইলেও কোথায় হয়, কিন্তু গাছ ঘুরিয়ে গেলে আর কিছুতেই ভিন মাটিতে বাঁচে না. That is her understanding of migration. She is aged now and she doesn't want to move out of her comfort zone. She must stay in this area. And she is kind of saying no to the offer that was made quite politely at the beginning, and then the husband kind of threatened her, saying that আমি তোমাকে ছেড়ে চলে যাচ্ছি, তোমার নাতি পুতি ছেলে মেয়ে সব ওই দেশে চলে গেছে, তুমি এখানে একা কিভাবে থাকবে, আমি তালাক দেওয়ার ভয়ও দেখায়. So he kind of threatens her, and he like held her in A Doll's House, tries to remind Nora of her motherly responsibilities, and refers to the pastor who kind of confirmed her into Christianity. We talk a lot about the confirmation class of Pastor Hasan in A Doll's House. So she is now responding to that. এতকাল যা শিখিয়েছো তাই শিখেছি, যা বলিয়েছো তাই বলেছি, এখন একটি দুটি কথা আমি বোধহয় নিজে নিজে শিখেছি. So can you see how Nora is speaking here? And I think Azizul Haq's English education kind of inspired him to give this woman this kind of agency. So while I was reading Agunpakhi, I was kind of feeling that something is wrong. It should not be like this if it is a real narrative. So I asked Hasan Azizul Haq why you did that. What did your mother really tell this to your father when you migrated? And this woman is actually she is talking to a son. So he referred to his own conversation with his mother. His mother did not say this. She told something else. I'll come to that later. But what this woman told to her son, that was a conversation with husband, and now it is a conversation to her son. And she is saying, সত্যি বলছি বাবা, আমি কেন তোমাদের সাথে দেশান্তরী হব, এই কথাটি কেউ আমাকে বুঝাইতে পারে নাই. প্রথম কথা হচ্ছে, তোমাদের যে একটু আলাদা দেশ হয়েছে তা আমি মানতে পারি না. একই দেশ, একই রকম মানুষ, একই রকম কথা, শুধু ধর্ম আলাদা সেই লেগে একটি দেশ হয়ে গেল, এ কি কোনোদিন হয়? এক লাগোয়া মাটি, এদিকে একটি আম গাছ একটি তাল গাছ, ওদিকেও তেমনি একটি আম গাছ একটি তাল গাছ, তারা দুটো আলাদা দেশের হয়ে গেল. কই ওইখানটোই আসমান তো দুরকম লয়, শুধু ধর্মর কথা বলো না বাবা, তাইলে পৃথিবীর কোনো দেশেই মানুষ বাস করতে পারে. Azizul Haq's mother told him that he wanted to stay with the grave of the first child that died early. So his eldest brother was called Zaman, who died in his early childhood, and he was buried there. So his mother very timidly said that I want to be here with him, but nothing else. But he is giving this female agency to this protagonist, and this protagonist is coming to a self-realization. This is the end of the novel, where she is saying to herself, when all other members have gone to East Pakistan. She was looking through the window, the departure of the whole lot, and she was talking to herself. আমি কিসের লেগে কি ছাড়লাম, অনেক ভাবলো, শেষে একটি কথা মনে হলো, আমি আমাকে পাবার লেগেই এত কিছু ছেড়েছি। আমি জেদ করি নাই, কারোর কথার অবাধ্য হই নাই, আমি সব কিছু শুধু নিজে বুঝে নিতে চেয়েছি। আমাকে কেউ বোঝাইতে পারলে না কেন আলাদা একটা দেশ হয়েছে গোজামিল দিয়ে, যেখানে শুধু মুসলমানরা থাকবে কিন্তু হিন্দু কেরেস্তানও আবার থাকতে পারবে। তাইলে আলাদা দেশ, আলাদা কিসে? আমাকে কেউ বুঝাইতে পারলে না যে সেই দেশটো আমি মুসলমান বলেই আমার দেশ, আর এই দেশটি আমার লয়। আমাকে আরো বোঝাইতে পারলে না যে ছেলে মেয়ে আর জায়গায় গিয়েছে বলেই আমাকেও সেখানে যেতে হবে। আমার স্বামী গেলে আমি আর কি করব? আমি আর আমার স্বামী তো একটি মানুষ লয়, আলাদা মানুষ, খুবই আপন মানুষ, জানের মানুষ, কিন্তু আলাদা মানুষ। That is her self-realization. Wonderful, but too ideal to be true, right? So I wanted to triangulate this fictional history that is narrated here with real history. And while taking interviews, when I was taking, while taking interviews with women specifically, I asked and tried to look into their agency, whether they had any say in this migration process. And the two interviews I would refer to today, the first interview was done with Mahmouda Begum, who is still alive. I talked to her yesterday, again telling her that I'm going to present on you.
How old is she?
She is in her 89th year this year. So she was born in 1937. It's in 89. I'm not sure. She said so yesterday. But this lady, her name is Mahmouda Begum, but she has a nickname, Shefali. She gave me interesting stories about the partition, and she said that she was married to a man in East Pakistan who had a job in East Pakistan, because all the Muslim boys were coming to East Pakistan because of the vacancies created by the Hindus who left for India. So her father used to work here in East Bengal in a British company, and then her grandfather was also he migrated to Rangpur because of the partition riots. Her grandfather's family used to live in Kolkata, central Kolkata, and then Mahmouda was married to a man in Medinipur, but the guy worked in East Pakistan. So she left Kolkata to stay with her in-laws during the partition, and since she was named Shefali, her father wrote her a letter from East Pakistan, and the envelope had her name Shefali on it, and it created a riotous situation in Medinipur because the Hindu postman, he thought that she was a Hindu girl from East Bengal who was married to a Muslim person, and the Hindu community kind of wanted to rescue her from this kind of sacrilegious marriage. And on the other hand, the Muslim youth, they also got ready to protect her rights as a girl and protect the rights of a Muslim man who had all the rights of marrying a Hindu girl, even if she is not a Hindu. But later, there was a maternal uncle who was called for to tackle the situation because he was quite popular with youth on both sides. So I'm going to finish it. So this is how they managed the situation, and she also mentioned one particular night in central Kolkata when her maternal uncle, one who was 2 years old at that time, the grandmother was producing children, mother was also giving birth, so she had maternal uncle and aunts junior to her age, and this small child, he asked for sweets one evening, and the Muslims did not love to buy sweets at that time because there was a big rumor that the Hindu ghoshes, I mean the sweet makers, they were mixing poison with the sweets to kill the Muslims. So the grandfather had to go out because the child was irresistible. He had to have sweets. He went out and brought some sweets and he tasted it first. To see whether there was point, but there was a lot of family hues and cries, don't eat it, let me eat it first, so that kind of family bonding. So what was happening outside was kind of answered in that way through family ties, and that particular incident was a decisive moment for the family to migrate to East Pakistan. And her grandfather came, she also came with her husband and never left for India ever after that. She never visited India because there were more relatives, but she never thought of India as her home from then on. But Mahmouda also told me that she had no say in this decision. She had to come because she was married to a person who decided to come to East Pakistan. And the second interview I took was with the son of this person, because she was already dead when I met the guy. His name is Monwar Ali, and he has several books written on the partition in 1971 from his personal experiences. She was called Hurun Nisa, and Monwar Ali Bhai, he told me her story. She was born in Satkhira, but then she was married to a guy in West Bengal and went to Basirhat to live with the in-laws. And after 1947, there was a lot of issues in her area, and she came back. They had the property exchange thing to come to Khulna. They bought a house and came through the border from the Ichamoti. Somebody was saying in the morning about the jungle passport. We are familiar with the term chapano visa. নদীতে ঝাঁপ দিয়ে পার হয়ে যাওয়া, that is chapano. So that is an interesting term. So people chapano visa, নদীতে ঝাঁপ দিয়ে. So I was familiar with this term from very early childhood. So there was Taki on the other side of the Ichamoti, and they came with a boat. But Bhashur, the eldest brother-in-law, he was the Kopta of the family, he was the master of the house. He told these women not to take any piece of jewelry with them. But she had quite much and she did not want to leave this. So she had a piece of cloth in which she arranged all her jewelry and tied it around her waist, and on that she wore the sari. And that's how she could, transport all her jewelry to East Pakistan. And when the decision-making time came, she was the one who decided to send her two daughters to school. And then when the Bhashur said, no girl from our family ever went to school and you can't do that, we are a respectable Muslim family, she was the one who said, I will pay for them, because she had that jewelry and she sold the jewelry to send her daughters to school. So that was a decisive movement. So partition kind of empowered her in that way. So there are different trajectories that we need to dig out. And from these we can come, I don't know if there is any conclusion to this because the partition has not ended. So I kind of came to this conclusion that women were yet to understand the divisive politics of the partition that impacted their lives to a great extent. The Muslim Bengali women migrated to East Pakistan not on their own accord, but being compelled by decisions made by their families. In most cases, women's role was that of a passive follower. And however, in some cases, especially when the women possessed property and wealth, they could participate in decision making regarding the future of their daughters, especially daughters. Class and literacy are thus two variables of agency, or the lack of it in this are the findings of the study that cannot be generalized for all groups of the partition migrants. The question remains whether we are still able to make decisions for ourselves or our daughters. Has the state been able to give us basic rights? I think this workshop has given us the opportunity to talk about this vis-a-vis the partition trajectory. And it is not easy to reach a definitive decision about the female migrancy in Bengal partition because a comprehensive study is really not available on this part. I have read several books by these people, Nitin Sengupta, Ananda Jahara Kabir, Joya Chatterjee, Shekhar Bandyopadhyay. My friend Anindita is working on it right now, and many others have written extensively on the cataclysmic turn of history. But Bengali women's trajectory is yet to be uncovered in its full vitality. Fictional works like Agunpakhi also deal with the half-real, half-ideal imaginary landscape that does not offer a complete picture. Therefore, oral history can be a complementary research tool to answer some questions that history does not offer. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Well within time. And at this point, I think we have 1 minute, but we will not ask questions. Because do you have a separate library for your department? Or it's just the main this thing? Never mind. Since we have 2 minutes to go, Zerin, you can ready your slides.
But
Niaz, may I just pass this on to you, to Firdaus. Maybe you have it in your library. Doesn't matter. This is an extra copy, and I'm giving it to you. And I do want to talk about it a little later, but I will defer my thoughts until I'm time.
no, but I wanted to ask. Well, you said you were going to tell us what Hasan's mother said to him.
Sorry,
He said that I want to stay with Mozambique's grave.
She stayed.
That
Oh,
is
that's
the
all
only
she
thing.
said.
That is the only thing.
She said.
Nothing
But
else.
that's quite believable, right?
It was true.
She was a widow, right?
She was. She was.
Did she
It's
go?
fact, but it's
She
true.
came.
But it's
She
fiction.
came. She came.
But this is fiction. Look,
Yeah,
we
that's
have
what the woman does.
we have
real life.
This is fiction. A writer can take a fact and fictionalize it.
Yes.
So I think that is something we bear in mind. He wrote about his mother, but he fictionalized this woman, right?
He specifically told me that he wanted his mother to act like the protagonist in the novel, and he felt sorry that she didn't. But it is a fact that she came after some years. The boys came as students, but she came later, after 7 or 8 years.
Well, thank you so much. We did want to keep the question and answer for later. Anyway, thank you, Firdaus, for asking that question. And now, Zerin, if you would kindly introduce yourself, and then you have after that. Thank you so much, Sabiha, for that very interesting talk. And I know it's a work in progress, and I hope that it will be published in due course. And thank you so much for keeping within time, because I think we will have time for questions. So, over to you, Zerin, if you introduce yourself.
Good afternoon and Assalamu alaikum everyone. I would like to thank the organizers for giving me an opportunity, because it's been very interesting from the morning that I've been hearing, and right now Sabiha's paper also. There's so many different ways we can study partition, or it's given us, I'm sure, thoughts on how we can invigorate our own study of English literature. My interest in the partition, or the partition fiction, started with work on 19th century, colonial history of Bengal. My interest arises from history, and with that I have twinned it with how it's represented in literature. To introduce myself, I am Zerin Alam. I'm teaching at Dhaka University. I'm currently the chairperson of the department, and I'm here today, as you can tell from my title, to discuss about Bangladeshi literary representations of the partition. As my title indicates, my paper is an attempt to map the emotional contours of partition in literary representation. The emotional dimension of historical events has now become quite a popular focus in research. In Emotions and Modernity in Colonial India by Margaret Pernot, for instance, she writes about the emotional exuberance that she finds in Muslim nationalist movements in late colonial India. In a similar vein, Leela Gandhi looks into the friendship between anti-colonial Indians and anti-imperial Westerners. Taking a cue from Gandhi and Pernod, I focus on emotions to chart a new path into partition fiction written in Bangla. Affect as an analytical category allows me to locate the intensity of feelings or attitudes, and at the same time privilege the lived experiences of ordinary people. In affect studies, both cognitive and bodily experiences are given emphasis. The focus on everyday reality can help me reorient the study of partition from grand narratives and macro history, away from the stories of Jinnah, Nehru, Mountbatten, or the map, and turn attention to the micro narratives of common people living far from the epicenters of partition. It is often mentioned in partition studies that East Bengal had witnessed lesser violence, fewer riots, and less mass exodus than either Punjab or Calcutta. As Professor Niaz Zaman mentions in her book Divided Legacy, Bangladeshi novelists, unlike Pakistani or Indian novelists, tend to focus more on social changes and impact on cultural identity, rather than exile or nostalgia produced by partition. But does this mean that the people of this region remained aloof or were not at all affected? My readings of certain Bangla novels will try to demonstrate that the stories of the people of East Bengal, people who neither migrated or were not even victims of riot, also merit critical attention, as they too fell under the shadow of the partition, and in many cases their lives were entangled with the aftermath of partition. Let me, however, first begin by very briefly discussing the aim and scope of affect studies. Affect theory comprises of an interdisciplinary approach to forces and intensities that shape bodies and the world of these bodies. In other words, affect refers to a range of feelings and incorporates the cognitive and the corporeal. Intensities is what some people use to describe what affect studies look at. Truran uses the words visceral forces, vital forces. So all the sense of the strong feelings. As this is a new field and it is still in the process of developing, there is no single overarching theory. In fact, there is no one definition of what could be affect. The field is also divided into debates about some people seeing affect as pre-conscious, pre-cognitive bodily effects, and others may thinking of this more as bodily sensation. The field has been animated and enriched by the critical concepts of Brian Masumi, Sylvan Tompkin, Sarah Ahmed, and even Judith Butler. Following Alex Huen and Beat Scott, among others, I would suggest that it is better that we do not think of either or and adopt a middle path that does not support an opposition of bodily effect versus emotion and cognition. Affect studies with regard to literature tries to unpack passages where we find the effect of affect. Okay? I have here this very long quotation which I'm not going to read, but here affect studies direct readers to look for emotional locations in texts, to look for disruptive moments that will direct the reader's attention. This could be in the form of mood, setting, or a plot, or even character's own personal mood. Affect also pays attention to the body. Affect theory asks us to look at what the body can do, asks us to see how the body is implicated in what is happening. In this way, affect study brings in everyday life. By looking at bodies, by looking at everyday life, and threading emotions and feelings with body and history, I feel is a worthwhile project for partition studies, as this has the potential for emancipatory research. Wendy Truran points out that scholarship that combines affect studies and post-humanism or new materialism can create new human narratives that is other than white, male, cis. In this regard, a strategic mobilization of Judith Butler's critical concepts can help to adapt affect studies for decolonial or postcolonial studies. Butler's shift towards ethics from gender has been seen by some critics as an alignment with the turn to affect. Butler's view on livable life, or even her idea of precarity and precariousness, indicates a clear connection. For my readings of Partition, I'm bringing in the concept of precarity, as the characters of the novel are mostly marginalized individuals, and their vulnerability is not just economic precarity, but a vulnerability that is situational, and I would say their lives are endangered and at risk because of the state's refusal to take responsibility. The overwhelming preoccupation in partition fiction is mostly trauma and loss, and that is inevitable given the subject matter. But adopting an approach based on affect, it can be fruitful to open up the text to different feelings, to widen the range of emotions or feelings. Affect as an analytical category can direct us to embeddings of public sentiments that were being circulated at the time of partition. So by emotion, I'm not only looking at the emotion of the characters, but the dominant mood of the time, the structure of feeling, if you wish. And I would like to see how this has also been reflected in the two texts. In the Doinik Azad editorial published on August 14, 1947, here I'm just, there's a quotation, but I would like to highlight two phrases perhaps. The Indian subcontinent is luminous with the sunshine of freedom. We felicitate with all our heart. So I find this a disconnect between the tragic, the mournful literature that we find with partition. So this also prompted me to see how do Bangladeshi writers deal with this? Do they elide it altogether, or how do they make place for this public sentiment? So if I look at some passages, I'm going to start with Kale Mondira, Symbols of Time, as it's been translated, by Selina Hussain. This is a very long novel spanning 3 generations, spanning a number of... Oh, sorry, this is not Selina Hussain, this is Mokbula Manzoor. I am sorry, big mistake. I'm glad I put the photo. I can't read it, even though it says Mokbula Manzoor, and my eyes have gotten bad, and I'm not looking at my own. Sorry, I have Kale Mondira 1997, written by Mokbula Manzoor. Okay, I can look at my own notes. So this novel, is not actually about partition. It is about the family of Aminur Rahman. It starts in the British Raj period and it ends with post-Bangladesh, so post-independence Bangladesh. And one of the central characters is the daughter of Aminur Rahman, who is a child at the time of partition. So here is a paragraph that I translated. So we can see the similarities between the two. The year 1947, 14th August, from midnight the sky trembled with the roar of cannons. Okay, the streets were filled with crowds of people, laughing and talking. And at the crack of dawn, Shuli's father, Aminur Rahman, took his children to the rooftop, he raised the green flag, and he fired 2 shots. And at the end of the paragraph, the center of consciousness is Shuli, his young daughter. She suddenly remembers that this revolver from which her father had fired the shots was the same one he had brandished at her second brother when he was very angry. So this, from ebullition, joy, euphoria, we come to a disturbing moment. And although I don't have Quadnama in my discussion, but I found it so similar to a passage in Quadnama, and this is from the English translation by, not my translation. We have very similar description. There's a procession overflowing with people. People are walking with flags. An elephant is marching past the street waving 4 flags. But here too, the joy is disrupted. A young man who tried to hang the flag on a very high lamppost is electrocuted and he dies. But coming back to the idea that public sentiment was very overwhelming, in this same passage, Ilyas writes, the right novelist, mentions that Tamiz, one of the characters, was watching everything. He gets caught up. Even though he sees this young man die, he thinks this man must not have climbed up there without a good reason. And so he also starts shouting the slogan, "Long live Pakistan, long live Qaid-e-Azam." So I want to talk about bring in that how, yes, even in Bangladeshi partition novels, there is this register of this note of, this mood of joy, victory, euphoria that was short-lived, and the writers are pointing out this very short period of this joy by juxtapositioning both moments of celebration with tragedy. In Kaler Mondira, I would just like to point out that the very same day of partition, which was the day of independence, our main character, Shuli, she loses her freedom. Because in the morning she starts out by taking part in parades that took place in the field. But then when she goes to visit her friend's house, Geeta and Maya, Maya's brother will not let Maya go out with her and keep on saying that this freedom is for you, this independence is yours. She finds another doctor, a Hindu doctor visiting her father, saying the same thing. This independence is not for us, the victory is for you. And then later in the day, her elder brothers and sisters decide that she cannot go around moving so freely anymore because there is society, there's a change in social values. And so she cannot go out and play with her toys. Her clay pots and pans lay broken, abandoned, and there's a line that even the stove is ended, and she feels that her own freedom ended with the independence of the nation. The next one that I would like to discuss is very quickly is Ranga Prabha. This novel published in 1957 by Abul Fazl is a very early account of the partition and its aftermath. Here too we find an ambivalence, but here there is perhaps a greater idealization or optimism about partition. On the one hand, we have characters like Mr. Iqbal, who says that we want Pakistan, we need an independent Muslim state because of what the Hindus have done to us. We will not be able to compete with them, hence we need it. But the main character, Kamal, who is a student of Mr. Iqbal, opposes this. In fact, the conversation was prompted by Kamal wearing Khaddur or Khadi, which Mr. Iqbal cannot stand because he sees this as a symbol of Hindu nationalism and not pan-Indian nationalism. And Kamal leaves the school. Kamal rejects Mr. Iqbal's parochial, bigoted view. And Kamal later on, when he sees partition, he wonders, why could we not live side by side? If we could do so under foreign dominion, why cannot we coexist peacefully now that we are autonomous or independent? We see the conflict with nationalism. We see this conflict between bigotry and more progressive liberal ideas. Ideas that Abul Fazl presents through two different sets of characters. Mr. Iqbal representing the zealous views, and then we have Kamal's grandfather, and his mentor, Charu Babu. As Professor Niaz Zaman points out, this is one of the few novels where, in Bangla literature, where riots have been mentioned, where there is an acknowledgement of violence, of people dying. But this is also the novel, according to Niaz Madam, where there is also an optimism. And we can find this optimism in two ways. The title, Ranga Prabha, promising dawn, red dawn, new beginning. And also the center of the romance between Kamal and the daughter of his Hindu mentor, Charu Babu. So the romance between, the romance of Maya and Kamal shows us that presents the possibility of a better future. The romance between Kamal and Maya is an intercultural relationship, which again, as Madam pointed out in her book, is very rare post-partition, but Abul Fazl seems to be very optimistic about this. And I would say that is the effective strand of the novel. In terms of corporeal studies, I would say this novel also provides it. And I would like to point out here that although there was peaceful coexistence, Abul Fazl reminds us that Hindus and Muslims never ate together. And the only time they actually eat is after partition, when Mukul tells his mother that Kamal will eat with them one day. So I think it's through food, through this everyday activities, that there is possibility of bringing the two communities together. Moving away from this emotional intensity and fervor, I would like to now move more towards the presentation of precarity and even foregroundings of the body. And for this, I would like to introduce the novel Shonali Dumur by Selina Hussain. This time I've got name, picture, everything right. Okay, so this novel differs from Ranga Prabhat and Kaler Mundira, mainly because the story revolves around Hindu characters, the most precarious individuals of partition aftermath in East Pakistan. The narrative is mainly about the growing communal violence and discrimination against Hindus that emerge after partition. And it is about the bigotry, the animosity, but Hussain also shows us that there are progressive Muslims, sympathetic Muslims who help the protagonist. But in all the novels that I've been discussing, and I must admit it here, that I am only picking and choosing, cherry picking parts about the partition. I'm not going beyond. So I would like to not go into the greater depth about this novel, only focus on the representation of partition. This too I found very interesting because here we have the unique perspective of a child. For the child, the partition is a disruptive moment, a moment of great emotion. And the novel begins, and it becomes clear as we read, that these are as a Hindu family had gone to Nodia, but they had to come back. This is the reverse migration. They were not welcomed by the nephew or the person with whose house they wanted to go. So they're coming back to probably around Rajshahi, and on the journey back, the child is very excited because they walked partly, they went on a bullock cart, then they were set on the bus. But he notices that the parents are not happy, the adults are not happy. And he wants to ask questions to his father, what is this bird, what is this? And his mother, the father gets irritated, he has to move away. As he weeps, he thinks the breakup of the country is very bad. They use the word Deshbhag. If the country is partitioned, Baba will not be able to answer questions. He will not be able to recognize the birds. Why must there be such a division of the country? So this is a child's view of partition, a partition that has disrupted the normalcy of life. Okay, it goes on. So partition for Onimesh, who's the card, for him, it takes him a while to understand. He has to go back and he slowly understands what happens when his friends taunt him, why did you come back, when they have to move again, this time to Chatpur. They can no longer stay back in their old home. But coming back to the theme of, or my reading of effect, in this novel there is also a lot of mention of foregrounding of the body. We find the unease, the illnesses of the adults, the fatigue of the adults, and then the foregrounding of the body continues at the beginning, especially in the way the women deal with the trauma of their vulnerable status as women and minority. Animesh's mother and aunt turned to cooking to restore order and normalcy to their lives. Simple food like leftover rice and fried eggs are transformed into sources of vitality that rejuvenate them. Here we see how everyday quotidian activities of domesticity is empowering. It's a source of the energy for these women. Through feeding the children, they sustain their spirit, and they also come back to the idea of the normal day. And the novel is therefore references food several times. There are lots of mentions of khichdi, ilish mach, begun bhaji, how these simple items become a feast for them, because eating is their way of surviving. Their lives are a danger. They will be thrown out, they will be killed, so all they can do is eat. And the reference to food, I think, serves two functions. First, I think it is part of the child's perspective. It's a child's way of understanding the measure of time, playing, sleeping, eating, like when they get the smell of the food being cooked, so he comes running back home. Earlier he was playing in the yard. And it's also a way of showing us the gender perspective, the micro level effect of partition. And yes, it is in every day we get this feeling of how life is precarious. Because when Animesh's father, Omyonath, goes to the bazaar, that's where he meets the goons, the thugs who threaten him. There is Wahid Mia, the person who had actually bought up their property. He wants them now to leave. But it's also in this bazaar that he finds other people giving them help. And I think it's very nice, nice is a very silly word here, but I'd like to say that it's part of communal harmony as well, when Selina Hussain writes that there is a character called Kalamer Ma bringing in the first flower of her garden, Nasirer Ma sending them some shrimps, and Mansoor giving them the first ripe papaya from his tree. Now, I had Agunpakhi also, just to give you a survey. So I'll just very briefly mention it. I know I'm glad that Sabiha has explained it. But I'd like to say here in terms of effect, how I found partition. The very day when everybody's going away, when she has heard there has been partition, the nameless protagonist about whom Sabiha has told us more, her reaction is, I have a fever, a slight temperature. So the fact that great historical cataclysmic events can be felt in the body. Okay, this is what effect shows us, reminds us, that it does not just have to be on an abstract level, it can be on a very much corporeal level. Another very interesting thing this is the last point I'm going to make here, is this predates partition, but I just thought it went very well with my project of trying to find effective reading, and that is how Hasan Azizul has presented the famine of 1942 and 1943. While we are all familiar with the food scarcity, and in this novel also there is mention of food scarcity, how they have to measure food, how they cannot look at the children because they cannot give them extra bits or extra servings, etc. But there was an artificially induced shortage of cloth. And here we find that this woman mentioning that there were many people who could not go out of their houses, their hovels or their huts, simply because there was one sari or one cloth that everybody would have to share. And in this, the narrator belongs to a more well-off family, gentry, and there also for the first time they have to wear the Kotta Babu, whom Sabiha was mentioning, our narrator's husband, that being head of the household. He brings saris to his mother and asks her to distribute it. But this time these saris are so coarse, the mother says, take it back. What kind of a sari is this? The women of this household never wore this. And the husband and her son tells her, prices have skyrocketed, saris are no longer available, the tatis have stopped weaving, they are also starving, and this is all because of the war. So we forget these, but I would say that perhaps looking at corporeality or emotions would be a very fruitful way of studying partition, making it more alive for us, because for us in Bangladesh, partition has, as many critics have said, has been supplanted by our more immediate war of liberation. For us, partition is a little, perhaps, more in the background. So effect, I would say, is important, can be useful, I will not say it's important, but it can be useful in challenging dominant interpretations. It can help us to evoke ethical responses. And going back to Butler talks about frames of references, how what is not presented in media we often forget. So for us, partition is Jinnah and Nehru, Radcliffe line. For many of us, not all of us, let's say for many of us, but if we change the frames of reference to include the women who migrated, the stories we have heard, so the stories we've been hearing from the morning, the people who came from different parts of India to Bangladesh. If we look at the stories about the passport, these new frames of reference can give rise to new visibility. And of course, it can help us understand in greater depth the emotional resonances of the partition. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much. And we have now 20 minutes for questions and answers. So I think that's quite wonderful. So the floor is open. I'm not going to repeat what they said because I think that's ridiculous. You all were here, you heard them. And there's no point in my summarizing what Sabiha said and what Zerin said. You heard it. Now the floor is open. You can ask questions and you can go beyond also. To whom? Please say whom you are listening.
So to Sabiha, my question is the qualitative research you have done, interviewing 30 people.
Women.
No, not all of them are women.
Oh, not women. Oh, I see. Sorry. Well, not women. Okay, so that.
So which year and how easy was it to get the participants?
And may I just ask, I thought you were going to interview, it was going to be an interview of women, but you decided that you would. How did you choose? Let me just answer that so that you can answer. How did you choose? You asked
How easy was it to recruit the cohort?
And how did you choose?
It was a difficult task, of course, because the first generation of migrants were already, I think, most of them died. So I kind of announced in the department that we have undertaken this project. I signed the MOU in 2007, towards the end of 2017, and the interviews were taken throughout 2018 and 19, and it was kind of chosen as a, snowball sampling was our resort, because it was very difficult to find people who were willing to talk. And I was especially interested in interviewing women, but it was not a choice for us because there was already scarcity of respondents. So our students some of them brought their relatives who were migrants. And this particular woman, Mahmouda, I found because I used to go to her son's bookshop regularly. I didn't know that they migrated from West Bengal. So I was discussing with this guy. He was a sculptor, so we had a friendly term, and I was telling him that this is what we are doing, but we are not finding enough respondents. And he said, why don't you interview my mother? My mother was a first generation of migrant. So I went to her, and then she also talked about some of their relatives who also migrated. So said Manwar Ali was their, their relative through, marriage. One of her granddaughters was married to Manwar Ali's son. That's how I got Manwar Ali. And my students also got people from their neighbors and, relatives. That's how we could gather about 30 people. And
That's a good number.
most of them were men. That is a fact. And the women's histories were kind of brought out in the interviews where I went. So I was particularly interested in Muslim women's history. So that's it. And I would also like to add to Zerin Appa's comment on the clothes. I did not read my paper. This has all these things. The husband joined Swadeshi at one point, and Hasan Azizul also talked about his father. His father used to go from Bardhaman to Kolkata quite regularly. He would take the earliest train and come back by the evening train, and he would participate in meetings and all. So this guy, the master of the house, he became a Swadeshi, and he wanted his family members to wear the hand-woven handloom saris. So the khadi was there because of that mainly, and the poor people could not afford khadi because that was quite expensive. And the mills, the clothes that were produced in mills, those were banned in the area. So the poor did not have anything to wear except for one sari. So
That's earlier, but in 42, all the meal clothes, everything that was produced went for the war effort.
Yes.
And apparently Marwaris also hoarded, there was holding stockpiles.
Yes.
Marwaris, there were also a lot of Bengalis who
But I don't know, we can put it
some Bengalis who became Jerry. Okay. So thank you very much for asking the
No,
question.
but the timing was good. Before COVID, the interviews are done.
Yes.
Yeah. Good time.
Any other questions?
I would
Fidos?
I really enjoyed both the papers. It's wonderful to hear about literature and analysis and all that. It was just wonderful, so thank you very much. When Sabiha was talking, Shaila, Sabiha and I are now in a research project together where we are looking at single, middle-class, middle-aged women living on their own.
Single, single, middle class, middle-aged women?
Yes,
No, I'm sorry.
Not old women.
Not old. What is
60 is the new middle age.
What is middle-aged? Okay.
40s.
Okay.
Listen, middle age begins at 60. Our body is made for 120.
Any other questions? Keep
So,
in mind, 12
and
minutes.
comparing that between the fiction that may be written about them and the real life. So while Sabiha was speaking, I was looking at the methodology for ourselves. It was emerging right because we are struggling with that, aren't we? But Zerin, my question was to you, that when you talk about Judith Butler, you talk about the precarity, but you had talked about grievability as well. So did you come across that grievability, the bodies that can be grieved?
Yes, I did. It just wasn't enough time when I timed myself. I would say that Shuli, the little girl who can no longer walk around, the fact that we do not consider her suffering is one of those ungrievable. I mean, really extending it. Yeah. She would talk about victims of rape or war. I mean, she's thinking about Abu Ghraib and how prisoners and victims, casualties of wars, we forget them. So of course the partition, when we talk about so many people were raped, so many people died, so many people, we are not grieving for them properly. To grieve somebody is to recognize that person. And I think in riot victims are definitely, the minute we call them victims and forget their names, their individuality does become one of those ungrievable lives. I thought of starting with that, but then I thought precarity goes better altogether because these are people who have been rendered at risk and vulnerable because of political decisions and state decisions in which they, of course, did not participate. But bringing it back, going to frames of reference and grievability could be used for partition or for any migration. People who die, when we hear about the 27 people, I forget the number, who died recently, whose bodies were buried in Libya even before being sent to Bangladesh. Yeah. So that is literally ungrievable. Those lives have not had the opportunity to be grieved.
Any other questions?
I really liked both your talks. Just something comes to mind after listening to Zerin Ma'am's talk is that it's really wonderful how we can look into how a moment in history like partition manifests on the body and the corporal reality of it. And this reminds me of how it affected Sadat Hussain Manto, when he immigrated. He became a raging alcoholic and depressed and died prematurely as a result of the fact that he couldn't bring himself to relocate himself in Lahore. And I think it happened on this side of the border as well, with many. Ritik Khatri is one, right? You want to tell us?
I don't know a lot of details, but I was just watching, I might have mentioned this to you. I was watching his, the movie on his life, Dhaka. So there, that depiction is really, it moves you. That he never recovered from that effect.
But interestingly, I would say yes, they also suffered. But they were not as precarious as some of these women we find. Right. That Hasan Azizul Haq's protagonist. I mean, if it was true, it would have been very daring, audacious even. Right. I mean, the only way she can resist is by saying, I don't understand the partition. Right. I will not go. She just cannot be moved. But that would have been that would have been quite difficult.
There were a few people who stopped writing and producing music after the partition. There was a sitar maestro from Dhaka. He stopped producing music altogether. Sabiha Hussain Manto stopped writing.
Yeah, that'd be an interesting way of looking at how the artistic people responded to this symposium.
Your artistic endeavors, artistic talent is crippled by the partition. It's tragic.
Okay, we have 10 minutes. One more question, and then I'm going to say something.
I would like to know if somebody wrote the stories that in the morning the student who mentioned about Adiba.
What did she mention?
She talked about people who came from, was she here? Yes. I mean, if anybody would give fictional accounts of those, that is what I was looking for.
What was that?
Fictional accounts of people who came and flourished after partition. I thought in Bangla novels I would get that sense of. That is why I started out that I will not look just at trauma and loss. But it sounds silly saying here, but I have not, I'm going to say I've not read enough Bangla literature. There must be more. But I haven't really found that positivity of people who could, you mentioned people who say they've come here for better opportunities. the fictional representations of that better opportunity. I would like to find.
Well, okay.
Yes, especially from this part to West Bengal and India, Greater India.
No, those who went from here, they're always writing about loss and sense of nostalgia.
They
But
lost.
people who came
The
from
people
West
who
Bengal,
went-
they did better.
They did better because
But where is that
see-
novel? That's what I'm looking
No,
for.
in real life,
Yes.
they got plots of land. You remember, it was many, many years ago, we started all these projects and it fused because we didn't have money. We interviewed a number of people and there was one person who came, you know, in those days you had these servants who were like, what would I say, you know, retainers. Their nannies used to work with the generations. And this particular lady, of course, she was rich, and she told her maid that Tomra jao, okhane Tomra jaga pabe, jamin pabe. You know, the men married several times, right? So she told her maid, you go to Dhaka, this was after partition, you go to Dhaka, Tomra jamin pabe. And so her maid with her daughter and the grandchildren, they came to East Bengal. They came to here. It wasn't East Pakistan then, it was East Pakistan. They came to, and the lady who had money, who sent them, unfortunately, because she had money, she was unfortunately murdered. But because it was at that time, people didn't know. She was an elderly woman, so she died.
So she just
So
thought it was
yes,
natural.
so
they
in
didn't
real life there were people who benefited. Okay?
I think in the storm they mention a little, Arif Anwar mentions a little bit because in the storm there is exchange. I looked at
It's
but I did
not just
bring it.
exchange, it's not just exchange, it was a government who gave them this land. So they did. And actually just I wanted to say one thing. I am very glad. I am overjoyed. I can't express how happy I am that there are conferences on partition, there are books being written on partition. You know why? Yes. Because on the 50th anniversary of partition, I was chair of the English department, and at an academic meeting, I had actually talked to Ahmad Kamal of the history department, and I said that partition is not a literary subject, though books have been written about it. It is also part of history. Can we do a joint conference? You know Ahmad Kamal. I brought it up at the department meeting. And you know what the response was? I was the chair of the department. One of the teachers said, and I will quote what he said, Onar Matlab Taki. Not, I am sorry to say, I have to say, not one person at that academic committee meeting stood up and said, no, partition is an important subject that we should talk about. So I want to ask you all, why are we talking about partition now? Why? And why are we talking about the 1947 partition? Why are we not talking about the 1905 partition, which is the one which did all the damage? If the 1905 partition had not taken place, I don't think that Bangladesh would exist. To the Pakistanis, there are two partitions. Bangladeshis also talk about two partitions, but the dates are different. And now some Bangladeshis are talking about three partitions. I don't know what the young generation of today is going to talk about. I have no idea. I have no idea. So is it two partitions? And which are the two partitions? And were there three partitions? There weren't three partitions. The land was not divided. Bengal, Bangladesh was not divided in 1970. I will leave you with that. We have 3 minutes left. But I'll stop there because I know that you have something at 4 and I do not want to create any problems for the next week.
So, but we have enough time.
Oh, we can continue. No, but you said that. I remember what? Listen, don't tell me 3:30 and then say we have time.
We have 4 minutes.
Okay, 4 minutes. So all right. So let me talk about something else. You know, Qurratul Ain Haider. She was a crazy woman. I met her. I wanted to interview her. And the first thing she said to me, she wrote a book. She had gone over to Pakistan and she wrote a book in Pakistan, Aag Ka Darya. And the first thing she said to me, I will not talk about politics. What do we talk about today? And honestly, you know, she wrote this, it's a wonderful book, if you can read it. The Bangla, the Urdu is, the English, the translation is different from the Bangla, from the Urdu. If you can read Urdu, read Urdu.
Oh,
It's
I've
listen to
a story.
But let me just say one thing here. You know how people don't talk about things? She wrote 2 wonderful books. One about all of India and fireflies in the beginning from Buddhist times. It's so beautiful, so beautiful, so beautiful, so beautiful. I will love her forever for that particular scene, you know, with the Hindu and the Buddhist. Beautiful. Right? She went over to Pakistan, she wrote this book in Pakistan. She, of course, experienced partition. You could not be in North India, you could not be in Delhi, you could not be in Pakistan and not know about the killings. What did she write about partition? She just wrote Hindustan 1947, India 1947. Just get quiet. See, and I think that writers, historians, what is history? We do not know, because who writes history we do not know. It is the ordinary person's history we want to know, because they are the ones who are really living history. We do not want to know the grand narratives of the Pakistanis or Awami League or BNP or Jamaat. We don't want to know their grand narratives, because I'm sorry to say, they are all false. They are all false. We want writers to write, because even when writers take facts and turn it into fiction, the emotion is there. That emotion that we do not get in history books which deal with facts. So if you are a writer, please write. Sometimes you cannot write. I'm getting a book published, but sadly, it's a storybook. Sadly, because of political reasons, I've had to change some words. So I think to myself, I am being false to myself, because I wanted to say something and I cannot say it because some words are banned. Is it better for the book to come out, or for the book to be banned, or for Niaz, Zaman, the author, to be burnt? I don't know. But let me tell you how difficult it is for a writer when a writer cannot speak. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's
I got 4 minutes.
3 minutes. 3?
No, exactly 3.
Anyway.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And I think we should take this opportunity of congratulating our Niaz Sapa.
Yes.
In person. She got the highest award that I can get in culture.
Second highest
In culture.
Okay. Thank you so much. I'm not looking for the highest award. Sorry.
No, but it's a real recognition,
It
and we are very
is.
proud not only of you, but of our nation for recognizing you.
Exactly.
And our Guinness students, because she got it for education.
And I do say, okay, I'm supposed to talk for 2 minutes, right? So I'm going to first thank my teachers, but I'm also going to thank my students. Because without students, I have wonderful students. I have students here. Here are my students. Here are my students. Here are my students.
There you
They're my students. Sabiha. So, it's, and the present generation. But the present generation but I've stopped teaching now. I've stopped teaching. But the present generation of students are terrible. They are threatening. They are frightening. Because আমি তো একটা মানুষ, তাই না? আমি গুগল করলে তো এক জায়গাতে গুগল করতে পারবো। ক্লাসে যদি 12 জন হয়, তারা সবাই যদি গুগল করে, where do I go? There's no hope for me, And I remember Husnara Haq, I don't know whether did she teach you? I remember going to her room, and she would, তখন তো গুগল ছিল না, ইন্টারনেট ছিল না, and she'd say, Niaz, you've read so much, maybe you can help me. Tell me, where is this quotation from? She would read every single word, every single reference she would make. You don't talk 1/10 of what you study. But she was so meticulous. And she asked me, Niaz, you read a lot. And she asked me this question, and now when my students, I think, they help you a lot nowadays because you can give them work to do, and you present. I don't have to tell you because it's here on the internet. You can conduct the class. I don't have to talk about the sonnet. You can talk about the sonnet. So in a way, it's
I have
wonderful.
done that.
Yeah.
I've given a class to the students.
And it's wonderful,
I'm just
It's really wonderful.
stop you if you're wrong.
Yeah, that is. If they're wrong, you correct. And then, of course, there are students who, even if they have the internet, they will not have. I'm going to say, Miss, this terrible culture of Miss. So sorry, Miss. Next time I'll do better, Miss. চলে গেছে তোমার সমেটের উপর তো ক্লাস চলেই গেছে আর কি দেখছো Anyway, thank you very much for yours. And I enjoyed it.
Sorry, outside. So let's all have while we wait for the next
and